So thank you so much, Anthony, for sitting here with me today to talk about a few things. Your work with the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, or the GHF, and seeing its crimes in Gaza, and perhaps how your own view has changed with respect to the United States since you've been in Gaza. But before we get into all these things in earnest, I'm wondering if you could just give us a bit of a backstory as to how you got to Gaza, how you were invited there.
So I recently ended my 25-year military career as a Green Beret in the United States Army this past year in the early 2025 March timeframe, and UG Solutions, who is the security apparatus within the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, called me. They were looking to recruit former members of the military, either retired or recently gotten out, that had a special operations background, to be hired as a security contractor to secure and deliver food aid into Gaza. So that's how I became involved directly in the mission or the project in Gaza through the under the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. Was through being an employee of UG Solutions.
And at the time that they contacted you, did they tell you that this was a humanitarian mission, but that you would also be armed? And was there a red flag in your mind there when they...
So the explanation that was given to me, and I assume to all of those that were recruited, I don't know the discussions that were had with all recruits, but the discussion that was had with me was that the mission would be to take over what the United Nations mission had been in providing humanitarian aid, humanitarian assistance into Gaza.
Right.
And that my understanding, just having known prior to being called to be recruited, was that the United Nations under UNRWA and other non-government organizations working through the UN had over 400 distribution sites throughout Gaza, from the south to the north, west to the east, in Gaza City, in Jabalia, in Beit Hanun, in all of the areas. And the delivery of over 500 trucks every day. So I was going in and understanding that we were going to take over that scale of an operation.
Yes.
And that being armed, they did tell us that we were going to be armed, but with the notion that we were going to be armed for our security, for protection of our lives, that we were armed with the inherent right of self-defense, but that was it.
Right.
Much like you would consider a bank truck driving to load ATM machines, right? The driver and the security guard in that truck are armed.
Mm-hmm.
They're armed to protect their life if need be. They're not armed to go out and do police operations.
Right.
So I understood the premise of being armed in the situation under the understanding that we were there only with the inherent right to defend ourselves. And that is not what the reality was and what it devolved into being once we were all in Gaza.
And so how long after that did you actually get to Gaza? Did you have to go through Israel first? And
Yes, so all operations for the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation in the work in Gaza is staged within Israel. Everything happens, from Israel into Gaza, out of Gaza, back to Israel. There are no GHF operations that are permanent in Gaza. It's in and out type of transient type of thing. So I got called on the 13th of May. That's the first I had heard about the mission and UGS Solutions' involvement in the mission. And then the timeline given to me was like, if you want to work this contract, we need to know by tomorrow, being the 14th of May. And I was like, that's a pretty quick timeline. What are we, like, today's the 13th, and when are we going, when is this mission going to start? Oh, Saturday. You'll be on a plane Saturday to Israel. That was 4 days.
Yeah.
So from being notified to being offered the job to signing a contract to getting myself to Dulles, Virginia, to flying out on an airplane, 4.5 days. And then I was in Israel.
And when you got there, did you see red flags right away, or did that take some time, like days in? Or
saw what I would call red flags, maybe at the time, some red warning lights, not necessarily red flags yet, during the interview process when I asked, what's our legal status? When we go in, obviously when we go into Israel, and from Israel are going to be going into Gaza, what is our legal protective status? Because what listeners need to know is that the United States or the United Nations or NATO or any type of other entity is not operating in Gaza or within Israel under any type of military authority. From the United States perspective, that would be, we aren't there under Title 10 authority of the U.S. Constitution, meaning military authority. We don't have a status of forces agreement with Israel in Gaza to conduct any type of protective or defensive operation. My concern was, once we get into Israel, what is our legal status? Are we going to have a government invite type of visa? Are we going to be there as augmentation to the Israeli government with legal protection? And they didn't know the answer to that. The recruiter that was talking to me said, I'm not sure, but we'll find that out before you go. And I was like, that's kind of important. Yes. From that red warning light, what then came to me a red flag was that when we entered Israel, we entered on a tourist visa. We entered the country on a tourist visa. Therefore, conducting operations in Gaza, armed with automatic weapons and machine guns and tear gas and stun grenades and pepper spray, driving in armored vehicles on a tourist visa. So that was the first red flag. Yes. And there were others in terms of the organization of the mission. A rules of engagement was not provided. We were not provided with kind of what I would call a mission brief, overall mission brief on what we were going to be doing. It was more so thrown at us in terms of, we're just going to take it day by day. And by the way, today, the 24th of May, today we're going into Gaza. Right. It was very haphazard and very unorganized. And when I actually went into Gaza on the 24th of May and went to the actual distribution sites where we would be delivering food aid to, that's when kind of the red flags turned into alarms, and seeing where the sites were built and how we would be servicing these sites.
Yes. And you commented before that Palestinians, to get the food, they have to go through these areas that are extremely dangerous.
That's right.
And are set up so they're shot at. Could you speak a bit about that? And also, like, who exactly is doing the shooting? Physically, who is doing the shooting?
So, humanitarian principles in conducting humanitarian assistance, humanitarian aid, or humanitarian operations should follow 4 very specific and sacred principles of doing that. One, that it be done unilaterally. Yes. Meaning, it's not one country or another doing it, it's a unilateral entities like the UN. Yeah. That it should be done independently. So unilaterally of being in supportive of some military's operation, unilaterally in terms of how it's done by the mechanism that's doing it. You shouldn't be taking orders from an army, the Israeli government in this case, and that it addresses the need at hand. If you're going into an area and the population is starving, you don't need to bring children's toys and blankets. You have to address the acute need, and then finally safeguard the population. Right. That is a hallmark of humanitarian aid. You must safeguard the population. The distribution sites, what they call SDSs, or secure distribution site, there were 4. Mm-hmm. Now there are only 2. There were 4 when we first started. At those distribution sites, they were built and constructed by the Israeli military, by the Israeli Defense Force. That's not independent and unilateral. They shouldn't have been constructed by the Israeli Defense Forces. The way that they were established were built as military positions, not humanitarian distribution positions. Right. Where they were built, physically, in all of Palestine, in the entire geographical area of Palestine, where there were once 400 sites and now only 4, all to the south of the Netzarim corridor, and 3 of those 4 south of the Marag corridor along the Egyptian border. For any Palestinian to reach sites 1, 2, or 3, they had to travel through, they had to traverse through the ongoing offensive operations of Operation Gideon's Chariots. At the time, this operation started in March. Operation Gideon's Chariots was designed to clear all of the south and central part of Gaza. So by that point, by the time we started distribution operations in late May, any Palestinian that lived or was living south of the Marag corridor in Rafah had been pushed north into the UN encampments in central Gaza. There was no one living south of the Marag corridor. So any Palestinian that needed to come to these sites to get food was forced to travel through on foot, often great distances, 10 to 12 kilometers one way, in order to get to the food site. So where the food site was purposely built, a Palestinian would have to travel through an active offensive combat zone. Not a war zone, if you consider all of Gaza a war zone, but an active operational offensive combat area in order to get to the food. That violates the principles of humanitarian assistance. That violates international humanitarian law. That violates Protocol 4 of the Geneva Convention. And these are black and white. This isn't speculation. These are, you cannot do that. So to me, those were some initial alarms just before we even started distribution. Looking at how the sites were built, where they were built, raised immediate concerns for me in terms of the operation being conducted in a humanitarian way, or within the scope of international humanitarian law.
Right. And the Israeli military itself, is it working with the contractors? And are they the ones who are doing the actual shooting when Palestinians cross into that area?
So when you see, there's been, in addition to my eyewitness testimony,
Right.
the eyewitness testimony of many doctors and UN workers that are in Gaza, reporters that haven't been killed, the reporters that was coming out of Gaza, showing shooting into the crowds. As the crowd of Palestinians are coming to the site or leaving the site, the shooting that's often seen that results in quite a few deaths, in the magnitude of thousands now,
Right.
at or near the sites, is the IDF.
Okay.
Machine gun fire, tank fire, artillery fire, mortar rounds being fired. And I've witnessed all of these, have seen it, witnessed it, and captured it on camera, of mortar rounds being fired over the population, tank rounds being fired into the crowd, machine guns from the Markava tank being fired into the crowd. On the sites themselves, when the Palestinians come to the distribution site to get the food, there is no distribution method. There isn't a organized distribution procedure. The food is piled up in a big pile, and they release the line of 8 to 10,000. On the very first day of distribution, on the 27th of May, we had 34,000 starving Palestinians rushing to the site. That's uncontrollable. That's unmanageable. A normal operating day, if you will, of distribution, 8 to 10,000 Palestinians released from a release point, all coming to the site at one time in one large, massive group, being funneled onto this distribution site with one entrance and one exit.
Yes.
And while they were on the sites, the use of pepper spray, tear gas, stun grenades, non-lethal rubber shotgun shells, munitions, and at times live ammunition, lethal ammunition being fired, was from UG Solutions personnel, Americans on these sites. And sometimes from the site into the immediate vicinity around where the crowds were as a way to disperse the crowds. So you had lethal munitions being fired from the IDF, more so from the IDF, but also from UG Solutions contractors on the sites.
So the contractors, are they being tasked essentially to shoot to kill?
So what is very nefarious about the presence of the UG Solutions contractors in Gaza is that none of the leadership would take accountability for actions and how things were supposed to be. So going back to our entry into Gaza on a tourist visa.
Right.
Under that tourist visa, we had no connection to GHF at all. In fact, they said, you're not here doing this, this, and this. You're just here as a tourist. No connection to the company that we worked for or GHF. That provides, the ability to say, oh, we didn't have any part of that. So this plausible deniability built into the process. And then on the sites, before we started distribution, many of us had asked, we need to have a written standing rules of engagement. Like, this is how you will engage in Gaza with the civilian population.
Yes.
Standard operating procedures for escalation of force, meaning if I feel threatened, what are my procedures? Do I shoot that individual? Do I try to stop that individual? What's the threat? What level of threat? That's where all these questions come into legality.
Right.
What authority do I have to kill somebody in my self-defense? Or in the defense of something else, someone else? If a Palestinian man is murdering a Palestinian woman in front of me, can I shoot him? Well, I don't know. What's my legal status? So when you consider all of that, there were no rules of engagement. There were no standard operating procedures that were codified by the leadership. So going into Gaza, it was a Wild West, every man for themselves type of mentality, to where the behavior that the contractors took on as a group was simply mimicking or doing the same as what the IDF did. Oh, the IDF shoot at the crowd to disperse them? Then we'll shoot at the crowd to disperse them. The IDF, yell at them and drive bulldozers to push them back. Well, then we'll use pepper spray and stun grenades. It was this acceptance of dehumanizing the Palestinian population, and that not even recognizing them as the population, the civilian population, and that they must be safeguarded
Right.
in this operation
Yes.
at all times, meaning providing them food, water, and medical treatment, and that they're safeguarded in doing it.
Yeah.
The Palestinians faced numerous risks in getting food. One, would they even survive getting there?
Right.
Once they got there, would they survive getting home? And once they got there, would there even be any food left for them? Because the food was gone very quickly by a very small portion of the recipient. So many factors going against the Palestinians' even ability to survive, that UG Solutions contractors, along with the IDF, it was almost, there were like no rules, because the perception was that the Palestinians aren't even human. And that's how they were treated. And it's evil.
I have to ask, I mean, it's sort of a philosophical question. Are these persons who are carrying out these killings, these murders, in, how would I put it, in the context where they're not doing that, do they come across as reasonable people, but then become murderous when they pick up a gun and are tasked to do? Do you see like a jarring contrast between who these persons are when they are not killing versus what they're doing, I don't know, when they're, in some other context?
A normal life capacity?
Yeah, this is almost like what I'm trying to...
Yeah, kind of like this cognitive dissonance, or like this duplicity of personalities.
Yeah, almost like, I want to say, like, it's hard to say, but it's like, are these normal people who become...
Yeah, great question.
Yes.
And the answer to that in terms of normal people is yes, but caveat that by saying that within the group of contractors that were hired under UG Solutions, the majority, not every one of them, but the majority were military veterans in some capacity.
Okay.
Some that served a very short amount of time, Army, Air Force, Navy, Marines, Coast Guard, various services. And then you had those that served for a very long time, such as myself.
Right.
Varying levels of experience. And then there were those that never served in the military, and then there are those that served in law enforcement, various backgrounds.
Right.
So seemingly you would see that background as, people that wanted to serve and do good. However, the evil undertone to that isn't always obvious, I didn't see it at first, is that you had a very large portion of the contract group that were members of the infidels motorcycle club. So what I would refer to as extremists in their thoughts. I didn't realize that was the case until after about the first day or two while we were in Israel getting ready, prepared for operations in Gaza. I noticed that dozens, many of the contractors that were there in some form or fashion were brandishing a tattoo that had like a Crusader's cross and infidels, and it had 1095 on it, which now I know is the year of the First Crusades under Pope Urban to, take back the Holy Land. And I saw so many people with these tattoos, and I kind of asked, I was like, did I miss the tattoo station? How did everybody get this tattoo? I didn't get one. Like, what's going on? Like, was that a stop on in processing?
Right.
And it was like, no, we're all part of the Infidels Motorcycle Club. I was like, that's a thing?
Yeah.
I was like, you're adults.
Right.
You're grown adults. You call yourself infidels as a group, and you tattoo it on your body?
Wow.
So this was new to me, this subculture.
Right.
But their belief was that they were there as a modern crusade. They were there to go there on this job, to work this contract for this mission. Going into Gaza was a pilgrimage. It was a crusade.
Yes.
That it was part of their charter as an organization. So normal people, in the sense of, unless you talk to them about Muslims or Arabs, they're normal.
Okay.
But when that topic comes into play, well, their charter and the purpose of them existing is to fight jihad worldwide and to eliminate all Muslims from the earth. That's a pretty extreme viewpoint. In my opinion, that is a very extreme worldview. So when you see individuals like this that are armed with weapons,
Yes.
with impunity, no accountability, going into an area that for the most part the world doesn't care about, it's very easy to then follow that worldview of killing. And on top of it, they see it as, well, I get to go and harm or kill Muslims, and I get paid to do it. A lot of money.
I mean, that's part of the depravity of it. They think they're on like a righteous mission.
Absolutely.
Right.
Nothing that they think about in terms of, hey, these sites are set up that put Palestinians at harm.
Right.
Hey, we're not giving them enough food to survive. We're not giving them any water. They'll die of dehydration slowly.
Yes.
We're killing them. Yep, you are.
Yes, I think this is very important because it's really hard to fathom anything more depraved than shooting and murdering starving persons, Palestinians in this case, and of course who are simply trying to survive, and it's just unfathomable why anyone would do that. But I think your observation or this insight about this idea in this really warped way of it being a kind of crusade, does, I don't want to say help us understand it, but gives us some sense of the kinds of persons or the subculture, as you mentioned, that is at work there.
It's very easy to follow that path
Right.
and feel that what you're doing is right, even though it may be against your own morals and ethics, when the organization you belong to thinks it's right.
Yes.
But then there's no accountability for your actions to where anybody else on the outside to see that, to say that's wrong,
Right.
to tell you that it's wrong.
Yes.
Layer that then with, you're making a lot of money doing it. This is like a day in the life of a UG Solutions contractor. You wake up in a nice fancy hotel. All the contractors were living in either Ashkelon, Ashdod, or Beersheba in beautiful hotels, luxury hotels. That's where you live. Every day you wake up, you have yourself a nice breakfast. You get on a charter bus that comes to pick you up. That charter bus takes you down to the border at Karim Shalom, to the Gaza-Israel border. You get off the charter bus, get your weapon, look at the board to see what mission you're doing, which site you're going to, which rotation you're on, and you get into your armored military vehicle and you drive to your site. You deliver, or you're there for either delivery or receiving and distribution, and then your day's done and you get back in your armored car and you go back to your hotel, and by that afternoon or that evening you're sitting poolside and you're getting paid almost $1,800 a day US to do it. So when you take that into account and then you apply your worldview to what you're doing is right, that quickly becomes very nefarious in that you believe that what you're doing is right. I don't believe that others that are there, not all of them buy into this worldview, because there were others that resigned before me. I was not the first. Many resigned before me and after me. But there are some that are there where they have zero concern about what they're doing or what they're a part of is wrong. There's a genocide. Oh, we know. We're starving the population. We know. We're killing innocent women and children. We know. And that's a good thing. That's their worldview.
Yes. It's really staggering. It's really staggering. As someone who served in the military for so long, would you have described yourself, or do you describe yourself as patriotic? And has this experience changed that?
I consider myself very patriotic in the sense that I think many people misunderstand the duty, the oath, and the obligation of a military officer. I was not enlisted. I was not a non-commissioned officer. The oath of an enlisted soldier or a non-commissioned officer, though their oath is important, they have a different role in the military. They swear an oath to the president, to the officers appointed above them, to the Congress. As a United States officer in the military, when I raised my right hand on the day that I was commissioned by Congress as an officer, my oath is very clear, and my oath is very simple. I, Anthony Aguilar, do solemnly swear to uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and that I take this obligation freely. That's it. Period. I take no oath to a president. I take no oath to a Congress. I take no oath to a policy. I take no oath to a political party. And I certainly do not take an oath to a foreign government. So, my actions since I've returned from Gaza and speaking out about what's happening and our complicity in aspects that are clear violations of international humanitarian law, clear violations of the principles of our Constitution and what our nation stands for, that if the majority of Americans knew of, wouldn't stand for. So, in me speaking out, is that patriotic? Absolutely. Is it in keeping with my oath that I lived for a quarter of a century? 25 years I lived that oath. To uphold and defend the Constitution. Period. What we are doing in our involvement in Gaza and the way we are doing it is not only unethical, it is unconstitutional. And America needs to know.
Yes. Just before we started this interview, we were talking about where this is going and how much worse, unfortunately, this is going to get. And I'm wondering if you can expound on that, because your description in particular is very harrowing, and there's a certain kind of absurdity because it's on full view.
Yes.
Right.
We are witnessing a genocide and the slaughter and annihilation of a people, regardless of who they are. We are witnessing it live on 4K high definition every day on our televisions. We're seeing it every day. It's no mystery. What is happening in Gaza to the Palestinians is not because the Israeli military failed. The Israeli military is absolutely succeeding in their plan. Operation Gideon's Chariots in South and Central. Clear southern Gaza. Done. They've done that. Every building is leveled. Every Palestinian is gone. Every hospital, every school, every mosque, every playground, gone. Clear central Gaza and move everybody from Khan Yunis, Mawasi, to the southern portion of central Gaza into the UN encampments. UN encampments that are not being maintained or serviced by UN personnel because they're not allowed in. So these encampments have become death villages, just villages where people go to die. They get bombed by the IDF. So that has been achieved. If we rewind back to a month ago, maybe 45 days ago, when peace talks were still thought to be on the table, when we thought there still might be a political or peaceful settlement to this conflict, the thought of the Israeli forces going into Gaza City to clear Gaza, Jabalia, and Beit Hanun, the world thought that won't happen. We'll have a ceasefire by then. The world will not stand by for that many people to be killed in this urban war. And it's happening. Operation Gideon's Chariots 2 going into the north of the Netzarim corridor, which as they were doing that, which a lot of people don't realize and recognize because it's information that's hard to get. The Netzarim corridor is a corridor that connects the western coast to the eastern Israeli border in Gaza. It's 4.5 kilometers long. It was 2 kilometers wide. It was a strip where Israel leveled and bulldozed every single thing in that strip. House, home, school, electric, pumping station, water, everything gone. As they built up to invade into the north, they expanded the Netzarim corridor to 7 kilometers. 7 kilometer swath of area that is now gone, flat as this floor, controlled by the IDF. The entire Gaza enclave is only 26 kilometers long. They've taken 7 of those in area. So 21 square kilometers they've taken now, just for the Netzarim corridor, as they continue the assault north. Every day they continue their assault north. We see it every day on the news, whether it's Fox, CNN, left, right, European, Western media. We see it every day, where the IDF are leveling buildings, apartment complexes, municipal buildings, schools, mosques, shopping areas, block by block. They have also brought in forces from the north, from Erez, to push from the north, which you don't see a lot on the news because there's no reporters there. As they continue to push from the north and the south, every surviving Palestinian will be pushed out of the north, forced to walk with all of their belongings, what they managed to get out. And you see this on the news, the people with their tuk-tuks or their trucks or their jeepneys trying to get out. Forced down the coastal corridor, down to the south, to a 2.7 kilometer area concentration camp. What the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation calls a humanitarian transition site. Transition for what? Right? It makes you wonder. So, with all of the Palestinians forced to the south, every inch of Gaza from this site in the south, north all the way to the Erez border, will be cleared. No Palestinians will live. No building will stand. And that plan has been the plan from the beginning. From the beginning. In the Operation Gideon's Chariots operation on the offensive into Gaza, that's always been the plan. GHF was brought in. Remember, GHF didn't exist until February of this year. GHF was built and then brought in to be a part of this displacement operation, to man the internment camp, if you will. So when the world or Americans want to think that, that's a small war in a small place in a faraway land that doesn't affect me at all, it does. Because that concentration camp, and that's exactly what it is a concentration camp, has no running water, has no electricity, open sewage. They're not providing them water. They're providing them food rations every other day, every 2 days of food ration, only the equivalent of one meal. And on top of it, the people guarding that concentration camp, the armed guards on that camp, aren't the IDF. It's not Egypt. It's not the United Nations. It's not Hamas. It's not some anti-Hamas militia. It's Americans. U.S. citizens, Americans. America is complicit in this genocide. The United Nations last week has come out and declared that this is a genocide. The world, our allies, our American allies that have been our allies since the creation of our country, France, United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, other European nations, Asian nations, Japan, and others have all come out to say, we condemn this, this is a genocide, yet the United States refuses to stand up to stop it because we can. The United States can end this with a phone call. The United States can end this with an action. In fact, the United States can end this without having to do anything but allowing the UN vote for a declared ceasefire to go through without vetoing it. Just last week, the United States, again, vetoed a ceasefire. In the last year, the United States, as a permanent member of the Security Council, the five, China, Russia, United Kingdom, France, and us, we have used veto power in the Security Council 86 times as of last week. 51 of those, 51 times we have used our veto power was to block a resolution against Israel.
Yes, it's just so harrowing. I mean, one has to ask, all this colossal evil, where is it going? Ultimately, what is it all for?
What I see it, having been there and witnessed it and experienced the level of depravity and evil that you have to turn a blind eye to accept. To me, there's nothing worth that. But the people that are gaining, the people that stand to gain from this, the profit, the real estate, the resorts, the natural gas and oil that was discovered underneath Gaza in the south in 2009, that apparently Gaza has become so much more important to everybody. Also keep in mind that where the large deposit of oil and natural gas was discovered within Gaza is exactly where the GHF have built this concentration camp. The Gaza Humanitarian Foundation is nothing more than a land-grabbing colonial inject into Gaza to hold the land and say it's ours. For the day after plan, the Gaza Riviera, and these are not things that Tony Aguilar is making up. The Boston Consulting Group had a plan of what the day after the resort village of Gaza would look like. I didn't make that up. They did. It's clear what they're trying to do. So the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation and their presence in there and the evilness that surrounds this, what everybody needs to understand and realize is that this is being driven by powerful people who stand to make a lot of money. Not millions, billions. Powerful people who stand to make billions, who, whenever there's scrutiny against it, claim that it's religious principle. And by that I mean Zionism or Christian Zionism. Believe it or not, there's even Muslim Zionism. That exists too. So in this idea of Zionism and that controlling this land, that some of our leaders like Mike Huckabee and the GHF director Johnny Moore believe and buy into are on behalf of our nation enacting that religious belief, not for religious principles, but for money. It's profit. They stand to make billions. Once Gaza is leveled to the ground and every Palestinian is gone, they stand to make billions in the reconstruction. There's already construction companies in Europe that are vying for the bid to rebuild Gaza. And that will be billions. The world needs to wake up. This is not about the world not recognizing that it's a genocide. We recognize it's a genocide. So What is happening in Gaza is a stain on the history of mankind. This is a stain on human history, a stain that will never be washed away. The fabric of humanity is already stained.
Yes.
And we have a choice to stop it and do what's right, or to stand by and let that stand. And if it does, one day, everybody will say that this was wrong.
Right.
One day, everybody will say that this was wrong.
Yes.
And everyone needs to know that we could have done something about it. And we didn't.
Yes.
And the reason we didn't is because powerful people told us that we don't have to worry about it. That there's not a genocide. There's not starvation. There's not killing of women and children, even though you see it with your own eyes every day. It's happening. So years from now, when those powerful people and their billions of dollars don't give 2 cents about you as an American or you as a citizen of the world, remember that.
Yes.
We let it happen.
Yes, this is why I find this so jarring. And almost there's, in a negative sense, a spiritual element to it. Insofar as if this just continues, it's going to go beyond Palestine to the point where
Yes.
we're going to turn into a world where it's human beings don't matter. If
That's
he
right.
goes far, it doesn't matter. Morality doesn't matter. Goodness doesn't matter. Precious life does not matter.
Identity,
Yes.
society,
Right.
religion, race. As long as you're not part of the race religion that has the power, you don't matter.
Right. This is,
If anyone in the world thinks, because I've heard U.S. politicians say this, just let Gaza happen so we can be over with it, be done with this. No, rest assured. The Israeli government has even shown us their plan. When they have their Sunday evening government addresses every Sunday that they do, after they finish Shabbat and they come back to work on Sunday and they address the Knesset, they talk about it. Smotrich talks about it. Netanyahu talks about it. There is the Greater Israel plan. So, Lebanon, if you think Israel's endeavor stops with Gaza or the West Bank, you're wrong. It includes most of Lebanon. Syria, if you think it stops with Lebanon, you're wrong. It includes the entire southern portion of Syria. Jordan, if you think that it ends there, you're wrong. They want it all. Saudi Arabia, if you think it ends there, you're wrong. They want part of that too. And then once the Greater Israel comes to fruition, which, based on how quickly they eradicated all of Palestinians in Gaza, that's going to happen quickly. It will happen quickly. And when it does, to every American that's listening, to every Canadian, to everybody in the North or South American continent and around the world, do you think it ends there? It doesn't.
No.
It does not end there. And in America, if we as the United States, our government, complicit in the complete elimination and killing of an entire people, regardless of who they are. This is not a Palestinian issue. This is a humanity issue. It can happen here in the United States, in the streets of Chicago, in the streets of New York City, in the neighborhoods of southern Florida, in the hamlets of California, in the backwoods of Oregon. It can happen here. And if you don't think that it won't, get your head out of the sand, because it will.
Oh, absolutely. Anthony, thank you for the privilege, really, honestly, for this it's very illuminating conversation, but I think it bears on so much that I think people will take away from it in terms of what's happening in Gaza philosophically, the evil of people. But before we wrap up, I'm just wondering if there's any final thoughts, observations at all that you would like to share.
I think that the world cannot stand for the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation model of privatized humanitarian aid. That is not something that the world can stand by and allow to be replicated in other parts of the world. The Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, the model of this humanitarian assistance, under the guise of humanitarian assistance, is nothing more than a new way for colonial land grabbing. The Gaza Humanitarian Foundation is not in Gaza to feed anyone. They are there to hold land. That's been the goal from the beginning. I've seen the maps. I've seen the operations. I've asked the questions as, if all the starving people are here, why are we building our sites here? That doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. It makes sense if the reason you're building the sites here is because you want that land. Then it makes sense. So we cannot allow this model to then become the humanitarian assistance model in the world, meaning UN, get out of here, get out of there. UN, get out of here. UNRWA, leave there. We cannot allow that to happen. Second, we cannot allow what is happening to continue. And furthermore, we cannot allow what has happened to go without accountability. There has to be accountability. There must be accountability. If the world stands by with this happening and does nothing, we have allowed a new standard of humanity. And that is a dangerous place to be. And it doesn't matter what color you are, what the color of your skin is, what religion you believe in, what your ethnicity is, who you call God, or how you live your life. Every single human being is now under the yoke of this oppression, potentially, if we allow this to happen.
Yes. No, I think you used the right word for sure, this standard. And what frightens me is that it's becoming normalized universally almost.
Yes.
Or it's going that way.
Yes.
And so it just trivializes everything that's sacred and important about human life, whatever your ethnicity, your religion, and so forth. But,
this is not a regional, cultural, ethnic, or racial thing.
yes.
This is humanity.
Humanity, yes.
This is humanity.
Yes. Certainly. Well, thank you again so much, Anthony.
Thank you. I
appreciate
appreciate
it.
the
Yes.
opportunity to speak to you.
Oh, my pleasure.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you.